and I'm here speaking with Cindy Robinson, a friend of ours from the last few years. She and her family, and condolences to the loss of your husband last year when we were talking, Cindy.
Mhm.
But you've had some incredible experiences over the years, which really they're amazing. So I'm so glad you wanted to share this with the public eye. And so please, if you don't mind starting with a little bit of history with yourself or how you'd like to get this started, and I'm all
Okay.
ears and eyes.
All righty. Well, first of all, I mean, it's important to know that I guess I come from what's considered generations of contact.
Hmm.
So originally, I always thought it was like maybe through my mom, because as a toddler, even and little girl, I had a lot of experiences with my grandfather, which was her father.
Hmm.
And my dad had been in the Navy, of course, with World War II. And he never would even discuss it, neither would my mom, you know. And ultimately, as a child, then I just grew up and kept my stuff, um, like um, private, I guess you'd call it, just to myself. I have 26 cousins, and when we'd get together in Upper Michigan, we would, obviously talk. And even to this day, they'll say, "Well, what have you seen now?" So it's kind of like a family joke thing. But, the contact and the sightings and everything still continued even through my kids and my grandkids. And then now I have a few great grandkids, but there's only one of that one at, between 2, 3, and 4. He was telling his dad that he was having, he could see um, beings and they were coming to get him. So
Mm.
I I guess the big thing for me was that I never felt any fear with any contact. And I didn't feel they were going to harm us or do anything. And so I tried to bring up my kids not to be afraid of them and the grandkids and stuff, and then ultimately my great grandson. But it was hard, I mean, their perception of how things are occurring, because I think we naturally think of things fearful if we don't know them. And so that's the big thing, is trying to get over that fear.
Very true.
Yeah. And so, I would take naps in my grandfather's gas station up in his window. I remember being only 2 years old and toddling around out there.
Hmm.
And it was in Upper Michigan. And again, I felt comfortable. I remember the big neon light above, where I would sleep in the big window. And there were always like June bugs and buzzing and crackling. But for some reason, those noises were familiar to me, not because of nature, but because what I was exposed to when I was taken. So, and there was, I know I'm kind of jumping around, but while we're
Oh, that's
talking about
okay.
sound,
Yes.
ultimately, whenever I was taken, it was always super quiet and really never any colors in the background. The things I was on was in these massive rooms. And they were gray toned, and even though it was silence, it was a different kind of silence. Almost like, when your ears are plugged up sometimes.
Uh, or maybe a pressure situation,
Correct.
different atmosphere.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. And so that was another thing that I always remembered, looking around my surroundings, trying to figure out obviously where I was. But it was like a cement colored gray, and
Hmm.
it didn't look cement. It was solid, but it didn't look super shiny. The only time I saw real shiny things were these metal tables when, as an adult, and well after I was a nurse, they would take me and I'd be with, like, what I assumed was a team of ET surgeons. And we would go from table to table and they'd be showing me things, what their equipment and stuff did.
If I could
So,
stop you there
yeah.
for just a moment, Cindy,
hmm
could you explain, were these homogeneous beings that you saw over the years and during your invitations or abductions? In other words, they were the same race, like the Greys or something. Could you elaborate on
Um,
that, please?
sure. So most of our contact were with the Greys,
Hmm.
and they were spindly looking, almost drifted as they, went from one place to another. It wasn't actual steps that they were taking.
Interesting. Hmm.
And arms were long and spindly. And I always remembered four fingers.
Hmm.
So it'd be three up and then one that acted like a thumb.
Right. Okay. And about what was their approximate height?
I would say between a little bit under 4 foot to about
Okay.
not more than 4'2". I
Okay.
always remember them being small, kind of up to my chest area, and I'm like 5'3". So,
Many people over the years have, explained the gray phenomena, and not since the time before Eisenhower and then afterwards,
mhm.
where they had made numerous contacts with people, and they do seem to pick genetic disposed family timelines. And describing in detail as you are and continue about them and what they showed you um, is very interesting because of the case studies that we've conducted here. There are a number of similarities and some comparisons. So please do continue. This is, wow, interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure even where to begin because there's so much.
Oh, that's
But
fine.
anyways, with the Greys, they do telepathically talk to you.
Hmm.
And it's almost like you can hear a voice, but yet it's not. It's just bizarre how it works. Yet you know what they're saying to you. And until I always interpreted it as until they trusted you,
Hmm.
okay, they wouldn't reveal too much of themselves.
Hmm.
And so by the time I was like in my late 20s and that early 30s, the weird thing was when they were taking me, they literally would take your body. And
In
then
house levitation, or was there a beam involved?
yeah, I mean, I was okay with it. Even as a kid on the top bunk, you know, it was weird because my sister, who's 5 years younger than me, would be on the bottom bunk. And then, but they would always just come for me. And I knew that. And then by the time we were, well, I should say by the time my sister was old enough to get on the top bunk, then I actually admitted to her a couple of years ago, telling her that, oh, good, I can finally get some sleep because they're going to just come and take you now. But it was weird how I just equated that experience to just being on the top bunk.
That is
So,
interesting. I'd take a little intermission to explain to the watching public here and the listening and the reading public, ultimately, that you and I have discussed a number of things, and being both professionals and you being proficient with high education and directorship in medical, um, the medical profession and transcribing, etc. We've gotten to know each other that way. So my support for you is the fact that we're both accomplished professionals who have been awarded or certified in a number of areas. So you're not taken or disposed to um, something that is not exactly objective and correct. And I just want the public to know that about you.
thank you. Um, but anyways, then getting back to the grays, they definitely would get in your face. And
Hmm.
I learned how to handle that. I guess that's how they control you at first, is they literally are almost like, I mean, they're non-existent nose, but face to face. And at first I was always being afraid because their eyes moved. They were all black and
Right.
thick, but they almost looked liquidy. Like, you know how mercury moves around?
Yes, I do.
Or like a lava lamp. A lava lamp is too globby, but
Right.
how mercury is, where sometimes it stretches out and it undulates. That's the point I was trying to get across.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Cindy. However, the grays technically have thick layers. It's more like their own sunglasses because they're very light sensitive, and we've known
Okay.
that for many years. So for them to interact with you, and I've heard they're very compelling until the trust is established, that the light in the room is more suited towards your type of lifestyle and being able to see, but it's very bright for them.
True. Yeah. I do know that. And then also talking about that light. This is how I always knew when the kids were being taken.
Hmm.
Because as a kid, when they would come and get me, I always remembered this. You know how cobalt blue
Yes.
is?
Yes.
Kind of like in a neon light. That's probably why I was comfortable with my grandfather's
Hmm.
um, business light. Um, because it was that cobalt blue that emanated within the light
Hmm.
surrounding you or the room, and it penetrated under the doorway because the kids always slept with their bedroom doors closed as well. And then that's when I knew, like, if I didn't really hear anything, but
Hmm.
I felt it, like, as a mom, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do.
I Yeah,
Well, not as a
it's a
mom. I have
ins
no idea.
yeah, as an instinct.
As an instinct as a human, yes.
Right. And then I learned that when that blue light is there, I know they're there.
Hmm.
And yet I don't have the compulsion to go in there. It's like I know I'm not supposed to interrupt.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But you felt the telepathic. I've had an experience with telepathy as well, and it is like that. And it can be very cold or very warm, very direct, very compelling, or very soft. And just the short time I experienced it with one being, I was really set back. But that's why I believe now that all these different races and the beings that have interaction with the, mankind,
Yeah.
humankind, um, they know that you know before you know, and nothing happens by accident. And that's been one of my big, you know, mantras, is the fact that this is all not accidental stuff to everyone to understand. So please,
Correct.
thank
Yeah.
you.
And then ultimately, like I said, I saw mostly grays.
Mhm.
Once in a while, though, accompanying the grays were really tall, thin
Mhm.
beings. But they were more human.
Mhm.
So they had a lot of the human traits. But one thing I did notice
Mhm.
was that they all looked like they were twins.
Could we use the term tall whites?
Probably, yeah. Because I always remember the white platinum type hair.
It was almost like albino. It's not like normal.
Cor- Correct, yeah, yeah.
That's what I saw in LA. And
Oh,
the
okay.
being was around a little over 7 feet tall
Yes, yep.
and very telepathic. And I picked the being out of the crowd of others. And this being was standing on a street corner that was not a bus stop, and there was nothing else there.
Uh-huh.
So as I got closer, I started honking my horn. I see you. And that's when I got the telepathic wave. And in as much it said,
Yeah.
you know, if you everything's okay, but if you keep doing what you're doing, something's going to happen.
Uh-huh.
And I just felt not good, evil, or bad or good. It was just fact, you know.
Right.
And then I was like, okay, so I became very nice and placid and waved and drove on, and that was it.
That's funny. So for me, I welcomed what they introduced me to. And I guess, I felt that they were giving us an extra education, and whether it was in telepathy messages
Hmm.
or the things afterwards, it was odd that you left that experience thinking, oh, you know, I feel different. I feel like I'm supposed to be, it's like, checking on this or that. And then also there would be triggers as well.
Okay.
Like, you could be years later and all of a sudden there's an act or event or word
Hmm.
that triggers like an instant memory.
I've had that happen in other case studies over the years, and yes, there are triggers.
Yeah. And also, if you're talking to people that aren't sure if they've had an experience, it's
Right.
kind of funny because you can normally pick that up in the other person.
Hmm.
Um, and that's where, I'll trail off a little bit too, that I was always, even though I was a nurse by profession, I was still always drawn to like the alternative.
Right.
And I got into like frequencies and resonances, which I think even over the years, nobody even knew what that was other than tones. Um, but I feel it was all in preparation of where we are today and where we're going
Agreed.
in the future.
Um, I couldn't agree more. And I would like to add the fact that in our sober conversations over these subjects, you're hitting on key points that I've found as similarities in other categories. we all have, we're all part of that purpose, whether you call it a synchronicity or whatever, but we do have a purpose. And what I found different in talking to you was the fact that you were so objective and so straightforward with these experiences, of which some we are covering today, that I found it to be actually quite exhilarating, Cindy, and just keeping it to the facts and the way you have is it's a boon, and I think this is part and parcel of the purpose of getting that message out, to which now we have, this ability to
Uh-huh.
reach so many people in such a short amount of time. And I would agree that time is of essence in a number of areas right now that people are not paying
Correct.
attention to.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And also, I just felt like always inspired, especially with the frequencies and the tones. So there was, many, many years ago, at least 15 years ago, um, I would go up to Sedona
Hmm.
for some group meetings and stuff and presentations. And that's when Chet Snow and that was doing some presentations. And Chet Snow did a lot of studies on crop circles. And so he presented a um, a video um, at a MUFON meeting, and they slowed the crop circle video down. And I remember it was at the eighth octave of slowing down that I heard the sound that it was making while it made the crop circles. And the minute, the minute that I heard that, and my daughter was with me, my one daughter was with me at the time, and we both like had this shock on our face and poked each other. And we're going, that's it, that's it. That's the sound that we hear. Like literally when they're first taking you and putting you back. there's this residual vibrational tone, and you try to mimic it, and that is the only time that I ever heard anything close to what it actually really was.
Wow. The tones I've heard before, however, it may have been the sound that you felt and heard in the vibration during transport, to or from
Correct.
and returning to your home.
Yeah. And then, anyways, with that vibration, it was important. So, after that, then I would be specifically listening for it or waiting to feel it. And it
Hmm.
was odd. It didn't happen every time just because I was looking for it.
Right. Very true. That's a good point.
But, anyways, the few times that they put me back into my bed, um, I had what's considered, oh man, what is it now? Um, like a paralysis sleep or awakening. Um, and it was odd because when that's happening, even though it's just like literally a few seconds,
Hmm.
right? But you've been put down on something solid. You can feel it, and then you're like looking around, like, where are you? And I'd always recognize my bedroom. Um, but the problem was that's all I could move were my eyeballs.
Right.
And so when you have that, what it was doing physically, then it started making me have like panic, a, a panic feeling with heart palpitations. And so um, after a few times of that, and I don't like that feeling. And I told the Grays, and I said, you know what? I said, I'm cooperative. I
Hmm.
want to learn,
Right.
but I go, you need to stop doing that for what causes it.
Of course, you realize that a lot of the viewers are going to be saying now, were you probed or what was happening to you? As so many people have heard in the lore, and it doesn't usually work that way. They have done it because they even said they would experiment and they got permission. Um, that's another story by itself. But could you elaborate on that, please?
Sure. I do remember, I don't know, I guess I didn't feel it was intrusive, but I do remember them checking
Hmm.
for uh, capability of carrying a child.
That's a common denominator. Yes.
And so, um, and so I mean, I guess I was a little afraid. I was just telling myself I was just going to be okay. But I do remember them having it. It was like a machinery above my body, and I was on a table. And it's almost like what you would think of as being um in today's modern, like an x-ray machine. If you're laying on a table on an x-ray machine, they pull it
Mhm.
down over you and move it around, but they stabilize it real close.
So in their case, they were not intrusive so much. It was more digitalized, so to speak.
Right. And I they were, like I said, they were just checking like your organs and so on and so forth. And there were a few times in my younger years, I was about mid 30s, and they would take me to what I called visiting the cloned girls.
Wow.
It was this group of little girls. Um, they were
Well,
about from 10 to 12.
and we call hybrids now.
Yeah, but I called them clones.
I like that. It's like the gray. They're pretty
Exactly.
much all clones now.
Right. And it was weird because there was nothing defining them as different. They all looked the same, exactly the same. Same hair, again, was that white
Oh, the tall white hair.
albino platinum look.
Hmm.
and it was like a what we would call in the female world a bob. So it was straight across bangs, and then right at the chin it would cover,
Interesting.
and that's it. But it was odd. That was the time when I was introduced to these brown dwarf guys.
Okay. One quick question, if I may, Cindy.
Uh-huh.
Notwithstanding the grays, we all know one cannot really tell a sex, so to speak. How about the
Correct.
tall whites? Were they homogenous as well, or did
You could
distinct
tell the
females?
male and the female, definitely. Yes. But it was subtle.
The difference between that and Nordics, or more the blue tone skin tall people that
Yeah.
we've experienced, these were just stark, absolute white entities, but they had two sexes.
Yeah. But they're also almost transparent.
Hmm.
Like you could, meaning that their skin is so thin, if it's
Hmm.
a skin, their layer, that it's shadowed underneath. You could see shadows in places.
Well, that's also because, and so from some of the other studies, that they can manifest themselves pretty much any way that they choose.
True.
And so it was how it appeared to you.
Yeah.
Um,
So then it's hard to say whether or not, what you're seeing is what they want you to see, or is it their true selves. I never questioned it, to be honest with you.
and so it really didn't come up because, as I had in a
Right.
couple of the other cases, uh, the subjects were actually showed the manifesting of the body from being almost invisible, transparent to a full-bodied individual. And so, please continue.
True.
This is wow.
But anyways, so when Star Wars came out, which is
Mhm.
funny, um, I never saw them in the beginning. Is weird. It was only years later that I saw them, and it was funny because I don't even remember now the name of the one that he wore like a cloak, a brown cloak thing,
Hmm.
and he would walk like this. Obi Kenobi, is that it?
Yeah, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Yes, I
Is
think
that
Star
it?
Wars came out 1976.
Oh,
But yeah,
that's funny. Yeah.
the hooded
But I
character.
remember him like from the 80s.
Gosh.
But it was weird, but that's what they reminded me of.
Hmm.
And they had like sparse hair, and it was gray, that stuck out from the hood. So it only happened one time. Sorry, I was moving this around.
Oh, that's okay.
Um,
Oh, you mean the brown ones with like they call them the Ewoks, I believe. No,
oh no, they're
no,
different.
the Jabbas or something.
Ebens, or yeah. Um, but ultimately, these were not nice
Jawas,
guys.
Jawas. That's what it
Oh,
was.
okay.
The little
These were,
brown
yeah,
dwarfs.
yeah, these were not the nice guys.
Ah.
So for some reason, the little cloned girls were
Mhm.
like literally petrified, and they
Wow.
would all huddle around me when it
Mm.
came in the room. And I felt like I had to protect the girls, the little girls. So, and I wasn't even quite sure what they were doing with them, but the little girls seemed to be fearful.
Wow.
And so I don't know if I should even go here. I've only told my sister.
Well, it's totally up to you, Cindy. I respect your right to not
Oh, God.
share some things if you don't feel comfortable with it.
I'll do it. But the visual, just think of it as a joke type
Okay.
thing. Okay? Because that's really how I felt at the time. Because remember, I'm a nurse. I've
Right.
seen everything,
Yes.
right? And for some reason, when we were just the brown dwarfy guy and myself. We were somewhere just by ourselves. I knew no one, and the little clone girls were not in the room. No one was. And he starts walking and then like turned. And I'm not joking. He literally was lifting his robe in the front, which showed like a mechanical type apparatus.
Hmm.
But it was ridiculously large.
Yep.
And I know it was so weird. And I started laughing. I remember doing it and I'm laughing. And I'm going, really? You think I'm supposed to be intimidated by that? I'm a nurse. I've seen everything. And I
Oh,
remember I walked away and then he walked away. And that was the only time something like that ever happened.
mhm.
It was weird. I mean, my sister had things that she claimed she remembered,
Mhm.
like, things touching her toes and her feet and stuff like that. But yeah, her memory of things and experiences seemed to be a little bit more different than mine for, whenever we've talked about it.
Mhm.
But then later on, I did meet what I considered reptilians.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, there's good and there's bad ones.
Right. That's true.
So the bad ones are what I say draconian.
Hmm.
So they have this exo type skeleton body where in today's world now, like, they do the robots with these big wide chests, and small pelvis
Right.
and spindly like legs and arms, but super strong. And that's what those draconian reptilians reminded me of them. I don't like them. I will say it's not necessary fear, but I don't like them. I know what they're capable of.
A lot.
And then there's these other reptilians that are gentle
Mhm.
and odd. So their skin feels almost like if you've ever swam with dolphins.
I have not.
Okay. So that skin, you can feel the muscle and the strength under their skin, but it's almost inner tube type feeling.
Wow.
So with those reptilians, one of them had gotten sick, so they claimed, from a human,
Hmm.
and they wanted me to make it better, to fix it. And I'm going, oh, you have the wrong person. I work on humans. And I go, I don't know how to use your equipment. I go, you used to show me that stuff, but I don't know how to use it. And they insisted that I try something.
Interesting, because please elaborate, because the viewers have this question on mind as well. How did you come in contact with the different reptilian races? How did that begin? Because
Yeah.
I firmly believe, this universe is teeming with life, but
Mhm.
each individual case like yours, I'm here to help you elaborate on that so they get an answer.
Okay. I don't really know, and like I said, I don't know why. I just went along with everything and I felt comfortable. And so I never really questioned like how they appeared, where we were. Because I know, regression hypnotists that worked with contactees and stuff. Dr. Ruth Hover. Um, I belong to her group here in Arizona, and it was a good group. Um, and we really got along well and really clicked off and would often find our experiences correlated with theirs.
So may I ask you this then, in
Uh-huh.
the initial encounter, um, were you abducted like the Greys? Did you just have no other experience that suddenly you were home and then or wherever you were, and then suddenly you were with the reptilians?
Right. So most of my experiences all the way into my 20s was all grays.
Okay,
Nothing more that I even remember other than the men in black.
that'd be tall
And
whites.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I don't know. I call them men in black.
that's what it looked like to me. I mean, wearing a
They're
black
in
suit,
they're
white
they're
shirt,
in these
black tie,
suits.
black hat, and
Yeah,
that was
they're
before, well before Men in Black. Long,
I know. I laughed when they came up with that, but that's the best way. I used to say, the guys in those suits with the hats,
mhm.
and anyways, there's another big long story. I think I shared it with you. With those men in black and why we met them with no vehicle.
Mhm.
But my grandfather's vehicle was there, and there was always this exchange of tubes out of the trunk.
Hmm.
But ultimately, until I got into my 20s, late 20s, in fact, early 30s, that's when it started with the different beings.
Mhm.
And I said, there's plenty of humans. Well, you have to understand there's plenty of beings as well.
There are. I agree.
And I've had some encounter more than once.
Mhm.
Sometimes it was only brief and they never ever came back, but yet I know they exist and I know who they are. Um, but the the good reptilians, the soft reptilians that it took me, it was like 3 or 4 times that they took me. And it was weird. They said they indicated that I hurt their feelings, or I hurt them by my feelings of repulsiveness because I don't like snakes.
Oh, and because they said, you think I'm
And so
ugly, huh?
yeah, and so the feel versus, you know, the somewhat appearance. And so they literally would take my hand and make me like pet them like you'd pet a cat or a dog
Oh,
to get
God.
used to that feeling. I'm going, oh, come on, I don't want to do this. But ultimately, after the third time and one other time, fourth time. But during that time, I was doing the alternative certifications and teachings and all that. And um, so going back to that, ultimately, that is what I did. I did therapeutic touch on that reptilian that was sick, and that's all I knew how to do, because I'm thinking to myself, well, you can't take medicine. I know that automatically. Their bodies don't accept
Chemistry
anything.
totally, yeah, different, right.
Yes. And so that was the only thing I felt confident in my skill level. I am like super good
Right.
with my therapeutic touch. And I used to use it, in the ICU where I worked, on patients with their permission,
Right.
or if family gave me permission. And I would purposely tell people, don't tell me anything. Um, Even not necessarily a patient, even friends or whatever that were having a medical issue or whatever. I would sit and do therapeutic touch on them, not touch their body, but you do it right above where you can kind of feel an electrical
Mhm.
conduction. And I could literally feel where their problem was, their medical problem.
Mhm.
It was a heaviness that I felt
Mhm.
in. And then by moving that energy, you either get rid of that pain or that feeling. And so that's how I developed that. And I knew I was really good at it.
In the case of this good reptilian, did it work?
I'm assuming it did because you know what? After the fourth time, they never came back. So
It,
either I did something really good or really bad.
and from your experiences, too, though, I'm sure it was good. And I've heard of holistics, and I've studied auras and things with other people and family members.
Uh-huh.
We studied Edgar Casey and some of the Dr. Spock and all these others,
Yeah.
but in your case, I mean, you have an extensive nursing and administrative background. So you found that when you went to these groups, did that help you be able to communicate what your experiences were more clearly without reticence or, fear?
Um, yeah, I do. Because, like, I mean, I learned that in critical care. I mean, you got to be fast, concise,
Yes,
and you
yes,
better know your stuff and be
right.
able to react. And so, yeah, I guess I was always able to just, I mean, I have a really good memory. I discussed with you,
Yes.
what I was told in nursing school. I didn't know that's
Hmm.
what I had, but it's considered like a photographic memory. But
Right.
it only works for certain things. But for my ability to remember things,
Hmm.
I literally can even remember clothes that my mom sewed for us. And I correlate that with events that were important.
Hmm.
It can either be music or clothes or something that,
Well, because of your photographic memory, and I've really only known one other person that had such. Um, some of us all have different talents, but I've always marveled at a photographic memory because you actually take a mental picture and you can go through every detail. It's kind of like
yeah,
the Betty and Barney Hill incident, where Betty Hill would recall star systems and all that. They've been proven to be valid.
yeah.
Um, but in your case, you've told what we've discussed in our conversations. Um, are there, before we move on to your own family visual experiences of crafts, etc., that we discussed, are there any more encounters with the various beings that are not human that you'd like to discuss?
Um, the only other ones was actually it involved my husband a few
Okay.
times.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you know Cynthia Crawford.
I do not, and I cannot recall at this moment.
Yeah,
So,
well, she's passed away as well, but her and I were very, very close friends.
mhm.
And we almost felt like we were related, like in a star space type realm. But she was gifted literally by the ETs of the ability to do sculptures.
Wow.
And they would guide her hands. She had no formal teaching of it, nothing. She just started doing these sculptures. And we would, she lived like about 55 miles from me, but we would meet together, but we would be on the phone a lot as well.
Right. Okay.
And we would talk about all the different beings that both of us had seen, and she would try to sculpt them. And I tried to explain to her, like, I would wake up sometime from the grays being on my side.
Hmm.
And then on my husband's side, I remembered seeing, um, I don't know, I guess you'd call it like a Virgin Mary type being. It was definitely a female, delicate being.
Hmm.
And again, like this bluish color robe. And she emanated a blue light as well.
That's spiritual. In auras, that's a spiritual light.
Oh, okay. But, in
Green is
describing, I
health,
kind of
red
felt
is
like it
anger.
was a being,
Mhm.
and that um eh, she would be on my husband's side, and just like you knew she was looking at both of us as she cast her gaze off, and then she literally would just disappear.
Uh,
Where with grays, you literally could see them go through a wall, a mass.
that is very similar to Jim's experience in another article that I wrote called Skeptic Broken. And it took us about 2 years to complete this project. And his was very similar with the being Ava that he saw. But instead of gray beings, it was like her, I guess you'd call it biological robots. They were more
Uh-huh.
like pinkish green, but the same exact thing. They would come and actually come through houses, windows, and walls, and then they would come and collect them and invite them on the ship and bring them back up. In
Correct.
a, you're not moving, but you're being drawn by this light. And,
Exactly.
and the being said that I can compel you. That's how they got off the beaten track on their way home. So it's so similar to exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
Um, Another friend of mine who Tina has had many experiences over the years, and that's was her extraterrestrial invitation. Many years she had very similar experiences with beings such as you have had.
Mhm. Nice.
Yeah, so it's a big world out there, believe me,
It is.
and a big universe.
Yep. And then I'm trying to think. There were what I call wispy,
Okay.
blue, opaque looking beans.
Mhm.
And they almost look like ghost appearance type things, where wispy meaning as it lifts, it flows
Mhm.
and kind of stretches out. So it's hard to tell if they're actual solid being, whereas with reptilians and
But
grays and that
right. So,
and the
mhm.
dwarfs, I can feel and sense their solidness.
Right. Well, some of it, Cindy, between being actual physical presence, like my first sighting when I was 15, the craft was definitely very, very fast, real, luminous, white. And I now know in my heart, and a few things that happened thereafter within a year or two, they knew I was watching them from where I was standing in the backyard of my telescope,
Uh,
following the Echo satellite back then in 1967. uh, People have to please understand, once you experience these things, many people are not willing to share them. And in some of the studies I've done, it took months just to get them to be calm enough to come forth with the message, which is a total difference than you, because that's what I find so enriching and enjoyable about our conversations. But I know that they knew I was there. And to this date, after speaking with so many different people, we're not only not alone, we are part of the fabric that is helping not only to elevate the human condition, but to elevate all conditions. And it can be interdimensional,
correct.
it can be
Yeah.
paranormal, spiritual, it can be directly physical. And people have to grasp and understand that this is the dimension, the third dimension, where we are manifested as physical beings. But that doesn't mean other beings cannot come from other dimensions as well. So I hope that would fit in with what you're saying.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I did learn later on um, that there were like par- paranormal. I mean, I always had the paranormal stuff as well,
Sure.
like
Well, we had an
visits from
experience.
grandfathers and stuff like that. Yeah,
I'm sorry to have interrupted you on that.
that's
My
okay.
wife and I recently had one in December, soon after the passing of her mother, and we have the image that it blacked out the louvers on the
Oh, yeah.
curtains in front
Yeah.
in the living room, and it was semi-solid, and we got a picture of it, and to this date we can't, we go like, oh, can't do that. So, you know,
Yep.
was it a light diffraction or something? We've taken control images. We've done all sorts of things. So I have to
Yep.
totally concur with what you're saying. It can be spiritual, paranormal, and or interdimensional as well. It's all the above to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And often mine intermingled and mixed.
Yes,
But
yes,
yet I knew instinctively like which one was which.
right.
Is just odd.
Isn't it?
Yeah. So I don't know if it opens up enough of the fabric of the universe that, oh,
The way I see it, Cindy, my friend, is we are all part and parcel of the emancipation of information. Oops, we
oh,
just got
sorry. Hold on.
awesome.
Let me,
Was it a gray or a reptilian? No, I'm just teasing.
no, actually, it's my daughter.
Oh, okay.
I'm so sorry. Let's
So
see if it comes back. There we go.
there you go. I
Sorry
saw.
about that.
Well,
I
that adds
forgot
to
I
the
have
fabric.
I have my iPad and my phone
Yeah.
synced. So
So people know we were discussing this before you made a little trip to your daughters, and you couldn't bring your computer at the time. So any and all apologies to our viewing audience, but this is
yeah,
humanity in action. It happens.
I know. Sorry about that.
No, no, no need, Cindy.
Um,
Yes.
oh, but I was going to tell you. So one other
Mhm.
interesting thing, with my youngest daughter, we were at the movie when Signs came out. Do you
Yes.
remember
Mel
that
Gibson.
movie?
Mel Gibson. Mhm.
And we were really intrigued with that one because we kind of felt like Hollywood kind of got it right in most cases, just from our own experiences. But the scene, so the people who have seen that movie, so the scene where the children are screaming and they're by a window
Mhm.
and it's a birthday party or whatever,
Mhm.
and the being outside walks, across you know, the background of the window. And I'll never ever forget that moment because my daughter and I looked at each other. We go, oh my God, that's it. That's one of the reptilians.
Wow.
So that's a third one. And we equate it like a chameleon because it can blend in
Mhm.
with its surroundings and change colors, little bit of shape.
Mhm.
And so on that on that movie, that seriously was like a whoa light bulb, like whoa, we've seen them.
Yeah, because it
And
could manifest themselves and transport to different locations
correct, yep.
in the movie. Was that a similarity for you?
Yeah, definitely, yep. And then also there was only a few times that I heard a sound, an actual sound emanate from a reptilian. And it's like a high pitched screech.
Ooh,
Yeah, it's not pleasant, but it'll only do it if it feels threatened. I do know that much.
right.
And it's almost like a stop that. Yeah.
From experience, I've learned, and see if you agree with this, that the reptilians themselves are not nearly as telepathic as the grays or the tall whites or others. And actually, there's a bit of fear on their part because although we are not developed, we possess the potential for all of the above in telepathy, etc. That's why we have
Correct.
our thing we call hunches or,
Mhm.
deep-seated belief in something and that manifests itself, or precognitive situations that turn out to be true. And I know, and I have friends who have actually experienced that, and it doesn't have a distance factor involved to it, whether it's here, anywhere else on Earth.
Right.
It's just it can be experienced. How's that?
Yeah. I agree.
Well, in the so far we've covered close to an hour, and I believe this has been nonstop educational and enjoyable conversation. I'd like to
Okay.
bring up the fact that you and your husband, especially in our conversations, have viewed different kinds of crafts. So if you'd
Yeah.
like to elaborate on that, I'm
Sure.
sure viewers would love to hear it.
Yeah. So we were only married 7 weeks
Wow.
when we saw a huge UFO craft. Um, we lived in Wisconsin and we were going out to see his brother, which was considered like a outer suburb rural area.
Mhm.
And we knew it, it only took like maybe 25 minutes to 30 minutes to get there. And it was before the interstate was built. So it was on a 2-lane highway. And Wisconsin can be pretty rural, even though it's a
Right.
metropolitan city such as Milwaukee. But John is the one that spotted it first. And it was like an Indian summer evening. And that's why we decided to do it, because it was right around either October 5th or 7th. I remember that distinctly, in 1967. So if we ever can get records from that time to double check on that. And it was a Friday night. So whatever that Friday night is there in that October. And so we were in his car, which was a 65 LTD. We had the windows down, and we always had the radio on.
Mhm.
But as John spotted this and he started slowing up and pulling off the side of the road, we literally then were right across from it, looking out his driver's side window. And it stretched from the distance between two telephone poles.
Mhm.
That's how wide it was.
Were these standard wooden type of telephone poles?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So,
And it literally hovered just above those wires. And it, I mean, so it was low. But it again, no sound. No sound at all. Yeah, I don't even remember, we don't even remember the radio in the background. And we watched this thing and remembered seeing like colored lights rotating on the
yeah, could you
bottom,
please
and they were
describe the craft?
round.
Okay.
Yeah,
Please
and
describe
they
the craft, if
seemed
you
to
will.
be like primary colors, the yellow and the red
Mhm.
and like a bluish type green,
Mhm. What was
and they
the
would
shape of the
rotate.
craft?
It was definitely a gray color.
And the not only the size, we can probably at least 1 or 200 feet or more. In
No, John said it was more like 300.
That's the standard, like a football field side. That's the standard. Okay, good.
Yeah.
What was the shape?
It was, from what we could see of it, it was like a saucer,
Okay.
like elliptical, but yet shallow. I mean,
And
not real shallow. It seemed layered, you
right.
know,
So it was
with the
kind of domed,
lights.
and it had the lights going around it as well
Yeah, but underneath.
underneath. It's very similar to that Japanese pilot. I'm trying to remember. But please continue. Sorry.
Mhm. That's okay. And then, like I said, um, we don't remember having the shut off the car, or we don't
Right.
remember hearing it run. But ultimately, it was like we woke up and we go, "Oh, we got to get your brother to go see this," you know? And it was like kind of, you wake up from like a daydream.
Right. Right. Wow.
And um and then all of a sudden John's like literally pulling out onto the highway again. Of course,
About
no cars, no cars.
right. Right. That usually happens like that. They
Yeah.
they know it too. But about how long were you two in connection of viewing this craft?
We have no idea, and we didn't find out till many years later that it's considered time missing.
Uh,
So
Common.
so ultimately we got to his brother's house, and I pulled them out of the house, made them get in the car, him and his wife, and I'm going, we got to show you something.
Hmm.
And we literally drove all the way back to the Milwaukee airport looking for this thing and couldn't find it. Turned around and came back. But as we're approaching again, the exact same area, now all of a sudden that field is all lit up with what looks like military. And there's Jeeps, and then there's big lights
Wow.
and stuff. And they're like searching for something. And
Must
it's
have
in,
been a weather balloon,
yeah, and it was in a circular pattern.
right?
And John again instinctively just pulls over,
Hmm.
right? And we're watching this and we're going, well, why are they there then? If it, what does that mean? And so a Jeep started to come towards John, and John had been in the Army. And he
Right.
goes, nope, we're getting out of here.
Hmm.
And he took off.
In one of my
So then,
research studies of Rendlesham, sorry to interrupt, but
yeah,
we approached a major base that is now very active, and when I saw the automatic weapons that were being hoisted, my friend and I said, "Be quiet, turn around, and let's leave."
yeah. But what we did was went back to the house and we're talking to them, right? Explaining stuff. And then all of a sudden, my sister in law says, well, we were wondering why you were coming out so late for a visit. And I go, what do you mean coming out so late? I said, we left the apartment at 7:30, you know?
There's that time missing.
And she goes, no, Cindy, she goes, no, when you're pulling us out the door, it was already like 9:45. And I go, what? So ultimately, there's, I guess, an hour and a half of time that we really couldn't account for, you know, and, remember this is 1967.
Yes, ma'am. Right.
And so even though we tried to tell our parents, I mean, everybody said had all been in the military. They go, no, you can't talk about this stuff, you
Right.
know?
Heard this many times, Cindy.
Yeah, it was just crazy. But ultimately that night, I ended up looking up in the phone book, um, the Air National Guard, because they were stationed at the Milwaukee airport. And I go, well, I'm going to call that number. Somebody had to have seen something. Went in the kitchen, used the wall phone, and
The old
and
Klondike Five.
yes, and then called. And of course, I get this typical military old gruff voice.
Right.
And he claims they're on maneuvers. And I guess, I mean, I don't ever think sometimes for when I say stuff. It's just automatically out of my mouth.
Right.
And I said, maneuvers on a Friday night.
Hmm.
And I turned around and I looked at the clock over the stove, and it was almost midnight.
Wow.
And then, I said, maneuvers on a Friday night at midnight. And then he
Oh,
got kind of stern and said, what's your name?
yeah.
And I hung up then.
I don't blame you because you'll never get a straight answer,
No,
even to this date. I mean,
no.
with the present situation, now they're coming out with possible false flags. This is all ours. No, there's way too much evidence, and even what many of us have worked on for years, that this is real. What you're talking about, they were trying to cover up. And
Right.
it's rather much like the Phoenix Lights too, right?
Correct. Yes. Yes. But that was, I'm trying to think now, was that the only two times? Because it was with the Phoenix Lights as well.
Right. I remember you were talking about
Because
that.
I
Explain
was
that one.
driving. I was driving, and the F-15s had buzzed right over my roof, and I instinctively went like that.
Right.
As they banked into town, I'm going, what the heck are they doing? They're not supposed to be doing that. And because we've always lived around Luke Air Force Base.
Right. Right. The
So,
Goodyear area for the yeah.
yeah. And so, I was on my cell phone to my husband going, hurry up, get outside. Something's going on. And so that was the one only time that I didn't really get the vibe feeling that I always got when they were around, like, go outside, take a look, it's like that.
Right.
You can't help yourself. You're up, you're out the door, and you're looking, and you would look exactly, directly right at it.
Did you and your husband, John, actually view the triangular shaped craft and the shadow behind it?
Yeah. And it wasn't a sharp triangle. I say it's more like a boomerang. It was
Right.
more like a boomerang. Because at first, as I came down behind our house, the main road, and John was on the corner there, and I remembered seeing this thing. So I'm facing with my car west, and that thing was coming through what looked like a cloud bank, which was weird. It's Arizona. We don't have clouds very often.
And I've spent a lot of time in the Phoenix Goodyear area, and I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, but it was weird. It was like it was a part of.
Many will say that could have been the cloudiness due to flares. You see that they've tried to say that.
Oh, no. Nope. Never.
We've interviewed others who have given us the exact same rendition to what they observed as you have, you and John.
Right. And I got scared because instinctively I thought, oh my God, it's a jet, even though you don't hear anything. But at the time you're trying to justify what you're seeing, there were like 2 headlights on this side and 2 headlights on this side. So kind of like on each side. But they burst through that cloud bank, and for a split second, you think it's a Boeing jet wing that you see coming through that
But
cloud.
it's like 1 or 2 miles wide.
Oh, it was huge. I've never seen anything that big ever. That was the first and only time something that big. And I'm yelling to John, get in the car, get in the car. And it had glided over me and banked toward the Estrellas, which was south. And then
More Tempe Mesa area.
Yep. And so I said, we're following this thing this time. And it was weird because when I got out to the I-10 and heading west, John and I are looking around, and there were some cars out there. Not as populated as we are now, of course, but back then there were some cars on that highway, and we're going, and I was in the middle lane trying to follow because it was just above the highway. You could see the bottom of it.
Right. Was this on Interstate?
And it was gliding, huh?
Was it on Interstate 10?
Yes.
Okay.
And it was going west, and it was just gliding, and I'm following it. Well, I was going fast, but still, no one stopped. No one slowed down. Nobody's going like this because John's trying to figure out how come nobody else has seen this. Why are we only seeing this?
Yeah, they're not paying attention. They didn't know because there was no sound.
Probably. But ultimately, it banked again south and went over the Estrella Mountains.
Wow.
Well, back then, we didn't have a road. Estrella Parkway housing development is built back in there now.
Right.
But back then it didn't. The road only went a short way. It didn't even come close to going over to the back. So I knew I couldn't get through. And the only way to get through would be going all the way back to town and around the east side
Mm-hmm.
to the Maricopa side,
Mm-hmm.
which is on the other side of the Estrellas. And ultimately we went home, you know, and the TVs are always on because there's always a house full of kids there. But, you know, I hurried up because I knew we were getting close to the news for 11 o'clock, you know, and I'm going, hurry up. This has got to be on TV. And I know Dr. Kitai says no, but I'm going by my own memory, and it's never faulted me before.
Right.
And I had turned the VCR on. I taped over something. And there was that night, and I'm not sure what channel it was, had a reporter out by the Estrellas in his, and it was dark, in behind him, and they were doing the shoot, right? And they're talking about obviously something that was seen by a bunch of people, and people had called in. And it was just a short blurb, but you know, we don't see anything out here now.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Excuse me.
yeah, that's okay. But I mean, the thing that made me angry was in the beginning with that incident, with that event with Phoenix Lights. You know, they denied for a long time
Yes, they did.
that they did not disperse any jets out of Luke. And that was a lie. There were two, and I say they're F-15s. I didn't know at the time. There were two jets, like I said, that buzzed at the top of my car and banked right into Phoenix. And I saw their afterburns and everything.
We've had
And
other eyewitness accounts detailing the
yeah,
same
and it took
thing. Mm-hmm.
so long for
Yes.
them to finally admit, you know,
Something
and
was there. Yeah.
yeah, but I said they were so fixated. So when we did the initial Phoenix Lights movie, the documentary, I remember I was instructed to tell, you know, just about what I said, you know, I was coming home from school, blah, blah, blah. And then when I tried to talk about the jets buzzing my car, which they're not allowed to do, I got
That's,
shut down.
I've
I
seen it
got
before.
shut down right away,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, and it wasn't until, what are we now, almost 20 years later.
Correct.
And now she says, well, you never said that you had the jets. And I go, well, somebody's having a memory problem, because I said, you guys wouldn't let me. You said, stick to the facts. You
Yeah.
were in your car. So I never really was able to truly tell exactly everything, you know, and I was at school, and that's easy enough to prove too, because I was increasing my degrees, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and we used the campus that was over by like 59th and Thunderbird. So, and back then they didn't have the 101. You had to take like 99th Avenue and
Right.
zigzag in there, you know, and it's, you know, north and at the back of the base that
Right.
you end up. So, but ultimately, I mean, that was proof in itself as well. But
Mhm.
that was the only time like I literally chased a UFO.
Well, definitely thank you for sharing that, because to the viewers, that's going to add to a perplexing story um, that had been given, and misinformation has been rampant with this event.
Correct.
But
Correct.
other interviews I've conducted match exactly with what you're saying. So I'll give that confirmation for everybody to understand right now.
Yeah. And I will say now, I mean, you know, as the years went on, the contact changed, the actual UFOs changed. So I don't know if their technology changed or,
There's a plethora of different craft that have been
yeah,
discerned over time, from flying saucers to the cigar shaped transport ships, etc.
correct. Yeah,
I have friends who viewed this in the Mammoth Lakes area of Northern California, um, near, just south of Carson City. And they saw these crafts actually collecting the saucer crafts into their craft, and then they would leave.
right.
Um, People have been invited. I've friends that I know that were invited to join them on a trip and or look after their place while they were gone for a few years traveling. So the evidence is, to me, overwhelming, not just because it's easier, because I too have had experiences, but the type of experiences you and your family have had over the years is remarkable. I mean, and not everybody has that, but to be that lucid and that remarkably cognizant of what happened and how you have remembered it over the years, it bodes well for the
Yeah,
future of ufology on us telling the truth to the people.
yeah.
Um, so, Cindy, is there anything else you would like to add, that we might not have covered before we?
Um, well, on those incidences, just to let you know from the 1967 with the time missing.
Yes.
So 10 years later, our first daughter was playing out in a field and she came to get us, pulling us out of the townhouse, saying this thing, this thing, this thing. And ultimately, I had her draw us a picture. We went outside, couldn't see anything, and had her draw, and she drew a picture of a saucer with the colored lights, round lights on the bottom. And she goes, they go around, they go around. And it was right there, right there.
Wow. Well,
So
sorry, go ahead.
I think, yeah, yeah. I mean, I can go back, and I think I was like a couple weeks pregnant at the time. So it's interesting that that daughter at 10 years old,
Mhm.
and we never ever talked about it because you weren't allowed to.
Right,
And
right.
we were
That's true.
busy with life and kids and everything. And I remember John and I looking at each other like, how could this kid be drawing this and saying it was there, you know? And so that was, a 10-year thing. And then after the whole Phoenix Light thing and stuff, and I got more involved in
Mhm.
some other groups, and Cynthia and I had started another group, and a couple of her close friends, which I got to know pretty well, did regression hypnosis.
Mhm.
So they talked me into doing it. Even Dr. Ruth Hover had tried it multiple times, and she said, "You're just not one of those, Cindy. You block." And I go, "Okay."
Well,
And so I just thought it was like a joke, and so when they did it, like one took notes, um, and I was laying in a bed, and I had told them what I wanted to know. I wanted to know if I remembered anything from that 1967 time missing thing. And
right.
then also what the tubes were with my grandpa. And
Explain those
so,
tubes a little bit more, if you could.
oh, yeah, I'll tell you in a second.
Okay,
I'll
sure.
finish this thought first. Um, so ultimately, supposedly, I said under hypnosis that th- when John and I had the time missing, that they were teaching us how to drive the UFO
Oh,
with
wow.
our hands.
Hmm, hmm.
Um, and it's important that, you remember that movement that I did like this. And again, I'm at a house 55 miles from our house.
Okay.
John was working at home that day. And I had told him, I said, because he had called me and I had shut my phone off. And I said, oh, I said, I can't believe what time it is. I said, I'll tell you when I got home. You know, we were just goofing around with stuff. And so when I got home, I'm telling them, that I said, well, it's kind of exciting. I go, supposedly they were able to, you know, do a regression hypnosis on me. He goes, really? And and I go, yeah. And I said, they claim that our time missing, that we were, and I went to raise my hand. I hadn't even done it yet. And John puts his hands up and goes like this. What? We were learning how to drive the UFOs.
Wow.
And I was stunned. I stood there looking at him and I go, what? I go, you just did exactly what they claim I did under hypnosis. And you
Wow.
just said exactly. And I go, now you're remembering?
Wow.
So we're still not quite sure like what happened with that. But again, I mean, that's a confirmation something
Yes.
truly did happen,
Yep.
significant. And it was just odd. So it's bizarre things like that
Mhm.
that bring it home for you. Okay. And then as far as the tubes, and again, I have no clue. So supposedly, I remember them always being like round and the olive green military color.
Okay.
And so
From
supposedly the the tubes contained star maps or maps. They're like 3D, they're like layers of the stars and the universe and all that stuff. But I don't know how they fold up. I have no clue.
and
But
please,
that's
my
what I
mem
claim they were.
yeah, my memory's failing me a little bit. These tubes were in the trunk of a car.
My grandpa's car. And we would go out into the boonies in the woods and meet these two men, what I call men in black
Right.
with
Okay.
the
There.
suits, but there was never a car around. And my grandfather always told me I had to stay in the car
Wow.
when
Wow.
we did this. But this one day, I mean, I had to go potty. So I was like, I don't know, eight or nine, and you just run out in the woods and go. And so I got out of the car and I went in the back. And then that's when I saw everything. And I was going to tell my grandpa, I was going to go potty. And he was very stern. And he looked at me and he goes, Cindy, you hold it. And he goes, you get back in that car. I told you you're not allowed to get out of the car.
Wow.
And so, I was too little then to even discuss with
Mhm.
my grandpa what was going on. But I did notice, those two silent parchment white looking guys, and then they have black eyes like the Greys. I
Mhm.
do remember that. And someone asked me one time, well, if they wear sunglasses, how'd you see their eyes? And I go, I never thought about it, but I'm just telling you, their eyes reminded me of the Greys.
Well, it was also at night, wasn't it?
No, daytime.
Oh, it was daytime. Okay. Like
Daytime, yep. And then
one I
I
saw
had, uh,
sunglasses.
oh, okay. And then when I looked around, um, there were no other cars or vehicles, anything. And then those guys would just disappear. Poof, they're just
Wow.
gone.
Oh,
So,
what a story. And your grandfather was obviously connected for quite a
yeah,
period of
I mean, he was in World War One,
right.
had injuries, and even that history is a little odd as well with him. Supposedly, like in World War One, they didn't have communications and they used dogs. And my aunt had told me this story
Mm-hmm.
because he had ended up having a few strokes and wheelchair bound and stuff before he passed away. But my aunt was the one that told me about this. and she said that when he was in the war, that they got sent to Siberia.
Hmm.
And I said to her, I go, for World War One? I go, are you sure Siberia? I go, are you sure you're not saying Serbia? And she
Right.
goes, no, it's Siberia. It was desolate. And there
Right.
were only him and 6 other guys in a troop, or him include with 6. That's what it was, 6 guys total. And that's where they were for World War One. And then supposedly, so my grandpa, because I witnessed this, my grandpa would have nightmares,
Wow.
and it was always about snakes.
Hmm.
Snakes were all over him or were by him, which I thought was odd because I even looked up, some years ago, I even looked up to see if I could figure out, well, were there snakes like where my grandpa was in Siberia? But it's not likely, supposedly, because of the tundra.
Hmm.
But the joke was that the war was over for 8 months before they were notified that the war was over. Now, isn't that crazy?
It is, because really that was, beginning with Kaiser Wilhelm, and it was more of a European situation in Europe
Right.
initially. Russia was not really that much involved um, in the first war. I mean, it was, but as an
Yeah.
ally, it was. That's the first I've heard of anything like this. So that
Oh, okay.
I'm
But again, I was intrigued trying to make connections of everything,
right.
like through my family, because I knew, it happened. And even some of my cousins, which are my mom's sisters and brothers,
Right.
admitted that they saw stuff.
This has been one of the most well-rounded, concise conversations I believe that I've experienced in my lifetime, and you've kept it together
Thank you.
incredibly well. Thank you, in covering those times with my interruptions from time to time. Sorry, but it's something that really I consider very important to get out to people to understand, because we're living in some very interesting times, and a lot of things will be manifested a lot sooner than people think.
Yeah.
May I ask you this in before we close? Do you happen to have any images, drawings, pictures, or other um, things you might want to share in the article section that will be placed into the anthology with Universal Digest?
Um, I'm mad because I didn't keep that drawing that my daughter did. I mean, we had done multiple moves, and you know how things go
I,
with
life happens.
kids stuff,
Yep,
right?
sure.
But I'm trying to think. I don't know. I don't have any drawings,
Or
pictures.
well, Cindy, what you could do maybe, if it floats
I
your boat.
could probably sketch it.
Yeah, and I think just a couple of them that will go in with the article, because our interaction today I consider extremely important in sharing, and we have been going close to an hour and a half nonstop, and I cannot thank you enough for taking the time with me to discuss these events that have occurred in your family's history.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity. Like I said, I don't really, other than family or whatever, I don't really talk about it.
And that's where I really sincerely respect that, but I sincerely thank you from the bottom of my heart for trusting me as well, that we could get this out to people. And I do believe that as it gets published, and once it's in book form, that's it. We can't change anything. But before then, as with the videos, can edit somewhat, but I don't see where we need to. You've been very concise, explicit, open, candid. And thank you so much, Cindy.
You're welcome.
We'll continue to talk in a moment, but I just wanted to stop the recording now, and we'll continue on. And Cindy Robinson from My Heart, Ed Smith, Universal Digest, thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.